Hello there. I'm the Utter Crisp, and I'm going to be doing something a little different today. In light of it being that most wonderful time of the year, the Steam Summer Sale, I thought I'd take a break from my regular series billing and dive in to give you guys some quick-fire recommendations of games that I really like, which happen to be on sale right now. Some of these games have already had or will eventually have the having a mosey treatment. For those that have, I'll provide links to its full review in the video description. These are primarily in order of the steepest to lightest discount, and my only real rule is one game per series. Please let me know what you think about this kind of content, as I'm more than happy to consider bringing it back in future for other large-scale sale events. In the meantime, let's dive in. So here's the thing. I really don't tend to warm to zombie-themed pieces of media. I never much cared for The Walking Dead. I have a passing interest in Resident Evil, and I never bothered watching or reading World War Z. I'm sure they're all great, it's just that I always found zombies kind of oversaturated and a bit dull. Left 4 Dead 2 is the exception, and a pretty notable one at that. You see, children, back in the day, Valve actually used to make video games. Bloody good ones at that. Left 4 Dead 2 is arguably one of their best, right up there with other greats like Half-Life and Portal. Left 4 Dead 2 is a cooperative first-person shooter in which you and 3 bumbling AI, or bumbling friends, plow your way through hundreds of rabid zombies in your vain attempts to get from A to B. This seemingly simple goal is complicated by the existence of special zombies with various ways to inconvenience, frustrate, or outright murder you. The Charger, for example, sprints in out of nowhere and pins you against the wall before repeatedly curb-stomping you in a distinctly unfriendly manner. Throw in a plethora of different levels, including those from the first game, a full arsenal of different weapons, and a fittingly undying player base, and Left 4 Dead 2 is still one of the best FPS games on PC. Hotshot Racing is perhaps one of the closest realizations to a modern virtual racing that I've ever played. It's a stylish callback to an innovative era of racing games with a smashing low-poly graphical engine, complemented by a handful of diverse biomes and a cast of weird and wonderful characters. There are a broad selection of vehicles too, customizable ones at that. What I will say about this game is that the AI is rather rubber bandy and very aggressive. As such, it's difficult to stay in front of the pack at any time, and even when you do, they can and will run you off the road. I tend to play with a steering wheel in cockpit view, making every race feel like a high-octane battle to the death. I love it personally, but I can see why it may not be for everyone. Either way, it's a must for anyone seeking that kind of old-school racing experience rarely found outside of old arcade cabinets. By Grabthar's Hammer, what a savings! This may be one of the best deals in the entire Steam Summer Sale. Civilization 6 is the best game in the Civilization franchise. I'm calling it right now. I'm sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. When you find my body, don't believe the suicide note. In brief, it's part of a long-standing turn-based strategy series that sees the player select a leader and nation of their choice before leading them all the way from the Stone Age to the near-ish future. The Anthology bundle includes literally everything ever made, packaged and sold for Civilization 6, from the early DLC leaders to the 2 major expansions and the New Frontier Pass. It is absolutely the definitive version of an incredible game, and I can't recommend this bundle more emphatically. There are hundreds to thousands of hours of gameplay here, as well as a decent modding community to keep things fresh once you've finally exhausted everything the game has to offer. I believe owners of the Anthology bundle also get the newer leader pack as well. Sleeping Dogs is literally the best Grand Theft Auto clone, even beating out Grand Theft Auto itself, in my opinion. It was a fresh, innovative take on the open world formula, throwing it into the melting pot with so many classics of Hong Kong cinema. It is technically the final entry of the much older True Crime series, but the only true crime to be found here is that it never received a sequel. Hong Kong is such a fantastic setting for a video game that I'm honestly clueless that it isn't used more often. It serves as a marvellous set piece for the story, Whilst Sleeping Dog's story definitely isn't the most original concept, it's a standard undercover cop questions his convictions type deal, its execution, along with its fantastic martial arts gameplay and side activities like karaoke and street racing, makes Sleeping Dogs an all-time classic. I have a confession to make. That confession being that there is probably going to be a disproportionate number of old school style racing games over the course of this series. The reason for this is twofold. One, I've played a lot of Outrun fairly recently for the purposes of my video series and just recreationally, resulting in myself being on a bit of a kick for the genre. Two, there's just so many good games of this type coming out, or that have already come out over the last few years, mainly in the independent scene. In terms of raw content, Horizon Chase Turbo takes the cake, particularly when factoring in its numerous expansions. Just the base game boasts over 100 tracks and 30 plus cars. Whilst Slipstream may be my favourite Outrun style game at the moment, Horizon Chase Turbo gives it an incredible run for its money and is honestly the better deal of the sale here. I struggled to pick which Tales game I wanted to place on this list because honestly, I love every single one that I've played. However, from story to gameplay to world building to price point, I think Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition has to take the spot here today. I remember when the Definitive Edition of this game came out on Nintendo Switch a few years ago. I recall ploughing my way through it and finishing it in a week. I could barely put it down. I don't even recall the story too clearly at the moment, but I was certainly compelled to play on, to explore the world of Turkaluma and to learn more about the incredible cast of characters you'll meet and ally with along the way. Did I mention you have a dog as a playable party member? A dog who wields a dagger and smokes a pipe? Do I even need to say anything else? Honestly, you can't go too wrong with any of the Tales of games on Steam. Zestiria is one of the more controversial entries, but it's still a solid JRPG. What they all have in common is that they have spectacular anime introductions. I'm not even that much of an anime guy, but it always makes me want to watch a hypothetical 100-part anime based around the Tales of game that I'm playing in that moment. Level 5. The developers of Ni no Kuni are a studio close to my heart. They have a lot of hits and a handful of misses, but when they get it right, they get it so right. I first encountered Level 5 many years ago when I played through and thoroughly enjoyed Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King on the PlayStation 2. I've spoken about that game previously and briefly. It's one of, if not, my favourite video games of all time. Ni no Kuni doesn't quite reach those heights for me, but it's still a fantastic entry in the Level 5 Hall of Fame. Today, it seems that there are so many JRPGs that want to throw off and completely disregard their roots. Now, I'm all for innovation, but some of the things being cast aside simply weren't that bad. The classic overworld, for example. Even a series all but sworn to stick to absolute traditions, Dragon Quest has somewhat moved away from the classic overworld in its more recent entries, going for a series of interconnected zones instead. Ni no Kuni clings firmly to the notion of the old overworld. An overworld in which your character becomes comically oversized, monsters roam freely, and the scattering of diverse towns and villages pepper the countryside, offering shelter from the dangers that litter the land. It also looks really pretty. The combat is a strange mix of action game blended with Pokemon. It is perhaps the most controversial part of Ni no Kuni, but it's fine for what it is. Where Ni no Kuni truly shines is in its storytelling and presentation. Any fans of Studio Ghibli should immediately recognise their iconic aesthetic, which is in full display here across the gameplay itself and its beautifully animated cutscenes. Ni no Kuni is a charming, colourful throwback to an earlier era of gaming, and for its current price point in the Steam Summer Sale, it's one that really shouldn't be missed. Do you ever play Civilization but just wish you didn't have to wait your turn? Do you ever play Age of Empires but wish you weren't constrained to the historical era that your chosen game in the series places you in? Do you ever play Risk but wish that you could somehow zoom right into the action upon attacking other players? Then do I have the game for you. Rise of Nations is no spring chicken, having originally released in 2003, back when the real-time strategy genre was going from strength to strength. Happily, the Steam version has been given a fresh coat of paint and bundled with the content of its original expansion, Thrones and Patriots. It is a game in which you start with several cavemen huddled around a hut and wind up taking your nation all the way to the near future, or at least the near future for 2003. I've played quite a few real-time strategy games over the years, and I'd rate Rise of Nations right up at the top. The gameplay is as solid as Age of Empires in my opinion, and has some fantastic campaigns, including Conquer the World, which is literally Risk, seeded with battles that you have to fight yourself. At its current price, I couldn't recommend it more. Dishonored is a series that I really hope isn't over. Dishonored is the first game in a kind of trilogy, including this, Dishonored 2, and Dishonored Death of the Outsider. Honestly, if you've got some cash to part with, I'd thoroughly recommend all three. However, if you want to just test the waters a little, start here. It's an incredibly immersive sim from the same company that would later go on to bring you Prey and Deathloop, and Redfall. Buy it if you like Deus Ex and or bleak pseudo-Victorian and steampunk settings. The fact that a game of this quality is going for $3.99 is objectively hilarious. Dozens of hours of fun here in a game that can be played in a multitude of different ways, including all of its very high quality DLC. No, stay with me. I'm fully aware a game like this will have its fair share of detractors. I mean, on the surface, how appealing can it be, really? Ooh, look at me, I'm driving a big heavy truck slowly around thousands of miles of European highways, mostly complying with local road laws whilst delivering sellotape to Belgium. No one said how much fun it would end up being though. Euro Truck Simulator 2 is my zen game. It's the game I chuck on when I fancy switching my brain off for a little while and exploring a bit more of that amazing continent just over the English Channel. Slowly but surely hiring more drivers and buying more garages, conquering Europe one city at a time. It's particularly enjoyable if you're using some combination of steering wheel and pedals too. You can even turn on any of the local radio stations as you go about your merry way. I've only done this one time though. I was cruising somewhere in the UK, so it was already a rather immersive experience for me, having grown up here, and turned on a local radio station. I was treated to a news report about the then British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's latest report on the coronavirus pandemic. I thought to myself, oh no, is coronavirus canon? Is Boris Johnson canon? I don't want the coronavirus or Boris Johnson in my video game. I turned the radio off. Now I just listen to a mixture of synthwave and jazz. So it's no real secret that the Halo franchise post-Infinite is going through a bit of a crisis at the moment. I don't want to speak about it too much because you'll find more than enough information about the state of the game all over the internet. However, I still currently consider Halo the Master Chief Collection a must-buy, especially at its current price point. What you'll be getting for your money are 6 classic Halo campaigns, including the remastered versions of Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2, as well as multiplayer support for all of them, and much more. There are hundreds to potentially thousands of hours to be spent here on what ultimately was the best series of first-person shooters ever to grace the thousands and tens. Before Skyrim and its many iterations, there was the Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion. Oblivion kinda strikes me as the black sheep of the franchise. People love, and rightfully so, Skyrim and Morrowind, but I rarely see as much love for the 4th entry in the beloved Elder Scrolls series. Oblivion was my entry point, way back in around 2008 or 9 or so, and has been one of my favourite Western RPGs ever since. I will grant you its combat and general gameplay does not have the kind of satisfying feedback that Skyrim has, for an Elder Scrolls game at least, but I genuinely believe it has some of the best quest design in the whole series. The main quest is fine, although there are a few too mandatory Oblivion gates in my opinion, but that's not the point, is it? In Elder Scrolls games, the main quests are for nerds. In Elder Scrolls games, the joy comes from simply exploring the slice of Tamriel that they've carved out for you on this occasion, and discovering all of the far superior side content. Any veteran or perhaps even casual enjoyer of Oblivion will be able to tell you it by their first encounter in Hackdirt, for example. Oblivion is as goofy as it is charming, as dated as it is timeless, and currently only $4.79 for the whole thing on Steam. Do yourself a favour and mosey on down to Cyrodiil. It is an absolute crime, considering how closely entwined PC and Xbox gaming are these days, that Fable Anniversary is the only mainline entry in the Fable series currently available on Steam or the PC in general. Fable was a trilogy of games from the noughties and early 10s which took place in Albion, a tongue-in-cheek fantasy realm that bore a lot of resemblance to the United Kingdom, coincidentally home to the development studios Lionhead, may they rest in peace. If all three were available on PC, I'd be singing from the rooftops with a song I'd call Buy the Bundle, Come On, but unfortunately that simply isn't the case. As such, all I can do is recommend Fable Anniversary, an admittedly strong start to a great series. They are innovative action RPGs with a fantastic sense of humour, and Fable Anniversary features a whole host of different spells and abilities. The magic system was streamlined in later games, so it's arguably at its best here. If you're a fan of Monty Python, Terry Pratchett, or British humour in general, I urge you to check out the Fable series. 2 and 3 are backwards compatible for the more recent Xbox systems at the very least, should you want to continue on. So I'm finally going to have to come out of this particular closet. I'm one of those weirdos who actually prefers Age of Empires 3 to Age of Empires 2. I'm fairly sure it's because this was the first in the series that I played. I did so quite a few years ago, long before the Definitive Edition even came out. Honestly, I can totally see the flaws that people called it up on back in the day. I will say though that in its current state, Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition blows its legacy version out of the water and competes with the rightfully revered Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. Thanks to many updates and DLC releases, there's a vast roster of nations to choose from, not necessarily just centered around the Americas, as well as lots of different maps and challenges to keep the prospective player busy for a long time. I've played the recent version for dozens of hours, and I'm still trying and struggling to get good. I have previously recommended Planet Coaster on my blog, and I certainly stand by that. What though, if you wanted to play something a bit cheaper, or something which focused a little more on the day-to-day management of the theme park without worrying too much about total customization? Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 may be just the game for you. This was my entry into the Tycoon genre really, having spent many hours on the original CD copy I had in my childhood. Naturally, I didn't make so much functional theme parks as I did state-sanctioned death traps, but regardless, just harmless character building fun really. Whilst Planet Coaster is wonderful from a sandbox standpoint, Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 Complete Edition offers an insane amount of content anyway, being bundled with both of its expansions, Soaked and Wild. It offers dozens of different levels and scenarios through its 3 lengthy campaigns, not to mention it also comes with its own sandbox mode, if you don't want to worry about such paltry things as where the money is going to come from, what the park inspector thinks, staff happiness, and theme park health and safety. So does anyone here like Initial D? I'll be honest, I've only ever seen the Cantonese movie of the same name. I'm aware that it isn't necessarily the most popular point of entry amongst the fan base, but for what it's worth, I enjoyed it, and it got me interested enough to dive down the talk rabbit hole. By the way, watch more Cantonese and Hong Kong movies, particularly from between the 70s to 90s or so. There's some great stuff there. As the name heavily implies, Inertial Drift is a talk racing game with a heavy emphasis on its very unique drifting mechanics. It's a twin-stick racer for all intents and purposes, which is certainly unusual. Basically, the left analog stick only slightly turns in the direction that you want to steering, so you'll need to also use the right analog stick to force your car into a drift. If it's a particularly nasty corner, you'll want to hit the brakes as well. I struggle to place the overall aesthetic of the game exactly, but I believe it falls more into vaporware than synthwave. But there's definitely elements of the two blending together to form the perfect marriage of aesthetics. Now, please excuse me, I'm off to shave 6 milliseconds off my last run. I only got around to playing Mafia Definitive Edition in the last year or so, having heard glowing reviews of the original title, but mixed things about the remade, remastered, re-released trilogy. It seems that fans of the original release of Mafia don't seem to like this new version all that much, and having played it through now, I don't really get why. In short, I think Mafia Definitive Edition is a brilliant game, and one of the best experiences currently available in the setting. Apparently, people seem to bemoan the stricter direction the game had, sacrificing some of the open world. I didn't mind. Not every game needs to be an open world, sometimes less is truly more. In the current world we live in, where there are thousands of different games at our fingertips, I don't particularly like getting hung up in just one for too long. Mafia Definitive Edition took me approximately 11 hours to complete, and that felt just right for me. It was the length and experience of a fantastic TV show. Set against the backdrop of a Chicago-like city during the Prohibition era of the United States of America. There's even an easier difficulty mode now, so that infamous Grand Prix level is beatable and even enjoyable. The rest of the gameplay was totally fine, and what you'd expect from a third-person cover-based shooter. However, the story and setting ties it all together wonderfully, and I couldn't recommend it more. And, incidentally, Don Salieri sends his regards, see? Honestly, this may be controversial within the Super Monkey Ball community, which definitely exists, but I think that Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania is now the definitive way to play this amazing series in 2023. It incorporates so many of the old courses of the classic games that everyone loves, and even includes dozens more from other entries, such as my own gateway into the series, Super Monkey Ball Deluxe. It's also made by Ryuga Gotoku Studio, and to be honest, they can really do no wrong in my eyes. If you haven't played a Super Monkey Ball game before, it's a little like Marble Madness, in which you're guiding a spherical object around ever more dangerous courses, trying to get them to thread the needle into each stage's goal. Of course, this time, the marble has an adorable little monkey in it, which will scream in utter terror as it plunges off the stage to its death. Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania also comes with a cast of expanded characters from other Sega hits, such as Kazuma Kiryu, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Beat of Jet Set Radio fame. I'm also happy to report for longer term fans that Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania also includes some of the series' best party games. I was always a sucker for Monkey Fight, and it's as brilliant here as it was back on the PlayStation 2. Some people aren't as happy about the physics of Monkey Target, but personally I never played that game, so can't really make a fair comparison. Either way, this is the best Super Monkey Ball game to come out over the last 15 years, and presents a perfect entry point for new players, as well as a comfort food-like experience for veterans. Okay, so let's just get this out the way. Ys is already a curious choice of title, but Lacrimosa of Dana? It's like Japanese developer Nihon Falcon were trying to turn people away with a name like that. Heck, having played and beaten the game previously, it still takes quite a chunk of the game's runtime to figure out what on the absolute heck they're talking about with that title. Thankfully, that title is by far the worst part of the game. Ys VIII, Lacrimosa of Dana is brilliant. It takes the best from current action JRPGs whilst applying a rather unique Castaway-style setting. You start out on a ship, chock full of interesting and colourful characters, before your transport is attacked by a gigantic sea monster and you're washed ashore the dangerous Isle of Siren. From here you'll uncover the plethora of mysteries surrounding the island, as well as reassembling your crew and building a small settlement, which will help give you all a fighting chance of surviving whatever circumstances the Isle may throw at you. Ys VIII's gameplay is second to none, with fast-paced rock-paper-scissors style action combat with a total of 6 wildly different characters to choose from by the end of the game. It also has a killer soundtrack, which really ups the pacing and is the kind of thing that the Ys series is famous for. Ys VIII was my introduction to this awesome understated series, and hopefully it can be yours too. I don't care what anyone says, Final Fantasy IX is the greatest in the series. It took what was the best about the classics before it, added in characters like the Black Mage Vivi and the loyal to a fault Steiner, and boom, perfection. Final Fantasy IX is also the first JRPG I ever played, thus being responsible for my undying love for the genre. It does away with many of the sci-fi tropes found in 7 and 8, returning to its roots in fantasy with a healthy dash of steampunk for the most part. It also has one of the best soundtracks in the series, with incredible tunes such as Melodies of Life and Not Alone, courtesy of the brilliant Nobuo Uematsu. I would argue that in the current absence of a proper remake, though there are rumours, that the PC is currently the definitive platform to play Final Fantasy IX on. This is due to the existence of the Meguri mod. If you haven't heard of that, give it a search on YouTube or Google. It's a functional remastering of the game, bringing the wonderful but dated background art up to par, as well as adding quite a few other quality of life features. Don't worry if you're new to modding, it's a very easy install. I mean, I managed it. Oh man, this is another special one for me. On certain days, I will unabashedly stand atop my soapbox and call out to the masses, or the 3 people that listen, that Dragon Quest XI is my favourite game ever. whilst on other days it may fall to Dragon Quest VIII or Yakuza Like a Dragon to pick up that particular merit. Point is, this is a firm contender for my favourite game of all time. Do you like whimsical fantasy, colourful adventures, solid JRPG gameplay and fun characters? Awesome, then this is the game for you. To play Dragon Quest XI is to lose oneself into one of the most enjoyable fantasy worlds ever created for the medium, Erdrea. It's a world you are set loose upon to discover before being turned entirely on its head for the gripping second act. I've spoken at length about my love for Dragon Quest in previous videos, and I undoubtedly will do again. For now though, all I will say is that there is literally hundreds of hours of solid role-playing gameplay here at a decent 35% discount. If you've never tried a Japanese role-playing game or even Dragon Quest game before, don't be shy. This is the perfect entry point with no prior knowledge of the genre or series required. Slipstream is a game that I've shown offhandedly in a previous video, but have yet to dedicate a full review to or anything. However, what I will say for the time being is that this game is wonderful. It truly captures the essence of a classic horizon-chasing racing game, and it would have made a killing as an arcade cabinet back in the 90s, or in a modern day barcade or something. It takes heavy inspiration from the original Outrun, but stands on its own four wheels as a remarkable old school racing game. Also, as a massive synthwave fan and frequent r/Outrun lurker, I can stand up and declare with definitive, legit and absolute authority that this game has a banging soundtrack. The handful of 80s inspired tunes are amazing enough, but this game also actively supports adding in your own music too. Cruising your vehicle across the diverse 20 tracks that this game has to offer is only enhanced with the sultry tones of the midnight in the background. I also want to point out that as of this video being made, a day ago or so, 5 more tracks were added and a few more bits and pieces as well. It doesn't have the steepest discount ever, but it certainly didn't have the steepest price to begin with, so I'd thoroughly recommend checking this one out. And that's all what I wrote for this year's Steam Summer Sale. I hope you guys found something you liked. I'm going to leave it there. Just let me know what you thought, and we'll see about doing this again at some point. Toodaloo!